Super.
And I will share my desktop just so that we can follow on with where we left off. Right, you should be able to see my screen now, saying architecture.
Correct.
Cool. So what I'd like to do in a follow-up is to get your ideas around features, what we should be implementing. I've already said that I think we should split the monitor the health check function from the front end, because you can see that the health check on a single threaded architecture is obviously holding up the front end. I propose to do that using BullMQ. This is something that I saw Will is using in the 1KV backend. And I've been using that quite successfully in Metaspan for all sorts of stuff. All the update jobs are now running as BullMQ jobs. That requires Redis, and then we can run some workers. I'd also like to hear some ideas about how we do alerting. I'm using Squadcast just because they have a free tier, and I don't want to pay for things like PagerDuty. And then we need to think about what we're going to do to actually measure performance for the SLA. And one of the ideas is to actually get the measurement from the telemetry. We could either run our own telemetry server, or we could just subscribe to, there's a WebSocket subscription that you could subscribe to, telemetry.parity.io, I think, or something like that. But I did most of the talking last time, and I would like to give you guys an opportunity to contribute. What are your ideas?
I worked with the telemetry a bit. It's the Web3 Foundation one. And yeah, I got the logic to parse the data and stuff, but it's a bit flaky. And so, I mean, sometimes the nodes get disconnected. So there's some logic needed to kind of keep track of nodes. And the other disadvantage is you can only get the nodes by name. So there are no keys or anything on telemetry. It just knows names. So we need to track the nodes by name. Other than that, I'm not sure if we can replicate the same functionality with our monitor software. If we could do that, I think that could be a better option. The third option is, of course, running our own telemetry. And in that case, I think we would need to constantly keep track of the new telemetry releases on the code base. So we would constantly need to merge the changes and stuff. So I think I'm not sure if we need that. So I would say like two options are: one, using the existing Web3 Foundation or Polkadot telemetry, or yeah, just use our monitor software. And but I don't know how it would work with like upload and download speeds and peer counts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, do you know if we can get peer counts through RPC? Is there a RPC method for that?
Yeah, let me just pull this up. Hang on, sorry. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that. And yeah, I just want to show you that there are some, it's better in Chrome. So if you do, and you have a look at the actual messages, you can have a look at, where is it? WebSocket feed, and if you look at the messages here, you can see, you can parse this and you get lots of data. And then message 9 means something, and message 8 means something. It just you've probably already done this. Could sound.
Yeah. I'll just share the code that does all the parsing and stuff. 1 second.
Yeah.
It should be here somewhere.
So yeah, each of these things, like message 7 means something, and then it has a payload, right? And then some of these things can be, if you look at what's going on, how do we do you can look at the network ID, and the network ID will tell is unique. So if you look at the network ID, that will tell you the peer ID of the node, and this is how we can find out who you belong to.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of trivial because I got it in code already, Derek. So if you want to use this,
Yeah. No. Sorry, you go. Carry on.
yeah, it's exactly like you said. There are message types, and every message type has a schema. So you parse the message according to that schema, and yeah, there are multiple messages. So I shared the Rust code that parses the messages. So a few of the messages are there's one for version, one for best block, best finalized, edit node, remove node, and stuff. So nodes keep pushing these messages to telemetry, and then telemetry pushes them to the subscribers, WebSockets subscribers, and we parse that and we get the data. And there's a way to kind of, there are node IDs and then node names. So we should know the node names so that we can get the node IDs. And using that ID, we know from which node the message is coming from.
You have a look at the monitor. If you have a look at the monitor, you will see, for example, behind a certain URL, which is a service, if it's load balanced, this is the peer ID. So we already know the peer ID. Because that's the peer ID of the actual not validator, the RPC node. And that will match this peer ID here. So by having the peer ID, we could work back to what service it's providing information for, right?
Oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know that is actually the libp2p peer ID. Yeah, that we can match through that. You're right.
So that's one way of matching. But what I was interested more, so the technical of how to get those information, yeah, we already know we can do that. But I'm just trying to say is you can get the peer count from the telemetry, and you can get the version. Where is it? Implementation, I think it is. You can get the number of transactions in the queue. You can get bandwidth information. You can get the block and the finalized block. But what is interesting here is the block time and the block propagation time. I don't know if we want that sort of stuff in our SLA, if we need, if it's useful, you know, and the uptime.
It is useful from the perspective of monitoring if the block production stalled.
So block production, I think, is only relevant to a validator. And we're not.
So for the collator, there used to be a bug. I'm not quite sure if it's fixed yet, but they've been missing quite a lot of blocks just because of networking.
So I think the block propagation time is probably more interesting than the block production time.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So every time, however long it registers a new block, and it's averaging around about 6, obviously, because that's the block time for Polkadot. Okay. So we have a source of SLA data, and that's telemetry. We also have a source, if I just pull up of data. If you do an RPC call, I registered or documented it here, and one of the issues, SLA monitoring. If you do an API RPC system health, you get number of peers, and you get is syncing true or false. And I think that's interesting because we want to know if they're up to date or not. You could also get the latest block number just by calling the right. I think it's anyway in the API you can subscribe to get block hash or get the latest block, current block. There it is. So you could subscribe to, for example, you could do nope. One of these API calls, you can actually get the current block directly from the endpoint.
Yeah, you can subscribe to both best block and finalized blocks.
Yeah, exactly. So we have the capability to find out either if its status is syncing or how far behind it is. And we might say, well, you should never be more than 5 blocks behind, or something like that. You should never be more than 2 blocks behind. And then that could be part of the SLA.
What would be the source of truth there regarding the block height?
Well, good question, right? So
yeah, I use subscan for that.
I'm
not sure if it's like
I'm just thinking in a decentralized way, all the nodes should agree what the best height is. So if we're all running a copy of the monitor, and the monitor says, and maybe the monitor subscribes to some of the root nodes, the boot nodes, maybe that's applicable. Shall we get the block height from the boot nodes? I'm asking a question. I'm not saying yes or no.
Or maybe we can get the highest of all nodes.
Exactly that. Yeah, the highest of the cluster.
Yeah.
The swarm.
Yeah.
Also, as far as I know, there's no such a health check built into the node that would alert about it is stalled for some reason.
Right.
And that would help too, or like instead.
Yeah, I think if you had a Prometheus monitor on that, and you could put an alert to say that the block height should be rising, and if it isn't rising for X amount of time, then that should be an alert. The question is, should we, as the IBP, be monitoring that, or should the individual member be monitoring their own infrastructure? It's not clear. We haven't really created guidelines as to who should be monitoring what. Okay.
I will provide this feedback to the QA team, and we'll decide on that. I will return with the result.
Okay. Just from our perspective in IBP, we want to monitor stuff so that we mark our own homework before the world marks. We want to know about stuff before everybody else knows about it, because we want to react quickly. So yeah, that's interesting. We can do that by just calling one of the unsafe methods and see if it responds, or you could do a methods call, and if you do a methods call, it responds with all the methods, and then we could see if there are any methods in there that are considered unsafe. So that's quite easy. And there's this talk about wrapping, about everybody hosting their networks, hosting their services on the RPC endpoints, and then we would just run the same test over and over again, but changing the underlying IP address. I would expect we should all be running our own endpoints anyway. So if you went to RPC ibp.metaspan.io, then you would get a response. But also, if you went to rpc.dotus.network with the Metaspan IP address underneath that, you would get exactly the same response. Visually, what you get different is if you don't use a URL that's actually in Polkadot.js, you don't get the branding. And I thought that was really an interesting discovery. And I believe
the branding.
You get orange branding if you don't use the endpoint from this list here, you'll get the orange branding. For example, so here's our IBP-RPC metaspan.io. You get all the functionality, but you get orange branding.
Yeah, and it changed recently, I think.
Yeah.
Before
yeah.
It was.
So if you
like,
don't
sorry, it used to be black.
If you don't select an endpoint that's actually in the list here, you will get the default branding, which is orange with no icons. And I think nothing we can do about it. It is the way it is. So just an FYI. Right.
Derek, one thing here, do you think we should check if an archive is really an archive by querying log 0?
Good idea. Yeah, there's a method. There's a method in the Polkadot.js examples here. So how do you go at a specific block? You basically go and get a block from a long time ago, and then you say API.at that block, and then after that you can just say, query system, and you can get something.
Yeah,
going.
we'll just query the Genesis hash, I think.
Yeah.
Also, a question, Derek, regarding what Tom said in the chat, that we were more interested, or in the previous meeting, that we were more interested into measuring the response time of the node instead of the latency of the network. He said something about subtracting a value. Just to get rid of the noise of the latency of the network and get the result of just the response time of the server. Is that feasible or measurable at least?
I don't know of a way to do that in WebSockets, and that's how we're making the connection right now.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do is we could measure the connection time, but that's got so many different factors in it. Once you're connected, you basically have a WebSocket that's open and you have quite low latency compared to just a normal HTTP.
Okay.
But still, if you send a message inside of a WebSocket, I wonder what Google thinks about that. I have not seen a way.
Mm-hmm. Or if we all members deploy your monitoring system, and for example, we find out that for Turkey, I'm measuring 150 milliseconds. Somebody from Switzerland, M4C, is measuring 50 milliseconds and stuff like that. Can we just aggregate a function to, well, but actually the ultimate measurement, it should be the public how are the public around, for example, in Turkey, seeing the response time from Kubavi, for example? Correct?
I think
So
there's
we
two
will.
things. I think there's two things. There's one is what is the end user experience, and underneath that is why. So if the end user experience is acceptable, I guess you have an acceptable mark. But if the end user experience is slow, you would like to know, is it because they're on a 3G mobile phone, or is it because their network is okay, but the actual node is slow? So, and I think that's what Tom was saying, is that if we could separate those two, we could still have an end-to-end timing to say, I don't know, it's 400 milliseconds, of which 300 milliseconds is network and 100 milliseconds is node. And then you'd be able to work out what needs to be optimized. Sorry, guys, I'm not monitoring the chat. So if there's anything that you want me to stop for, please let me know. Okay. Okay, thanks, Kutal, for sharing that. It would seem that there is a way of tracking this using Python. I'll have a look at this later on to see what the server timestamp is. I wonder if this is yeah, I'll have a look to find that, to find out if we could, inside of a WebSocket, find out the difference between node execution time and network end-to-end time. I know you can do that when you do an HTTP, for example. Then you get all sorts of things like that's the performance of the actual web page. But if you go into network and you click on the link that you want, say something that took an actual amount of time, that one there, I think there's a way of looking at this in a graphical way of saying so much of it was doing the request, so much of it was waiting, and then so much of it was streaming the data back. And it's the middle bit, which is the waiting part.
Yep.
That it. Yeah, here you can see queuing, connection start, request sent. I don't understand, 99 microseconds. Waiting for server response, 116 milliseconds, and content download 0.19 of a microsecond. And then no, that's not going to help. So I think the expectation is that we might be able to get the same sort of response. So the same sort of method of, request sent, waiting for server response, but we don't know. I'll find a way, unless somebody already knows how that's done.
Okay.
Thanks for
Looks
pointing
good.
that out. Okay. Any other ideas about the SLA monitoring? I want to do basic monitoring as well, which will either get the information from your monitoring, Milos, or actually send the information to you. For example, when a node is down, or when a port is down.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Where we were talking in the chat yesterday about the automation of the GeoDNS, and I think it will be also same for the Anycast services. But it will be great if your monitoring can be offering some kind of a socket for allowing the administrators of the GeoDNS to automate the down and up events. At the moment, I am just taking advantage of my provider of GeoDNS services, because they offer very basic just ping monitoring. So if somebody is failing the pings, they just remove the entry in the DNS configuration, and that's it. When you are back and responding to pings, you are added automatically back to the DNS.
And is that at an IP level, or is it at even individual port?
No, that's a IP level, ICMP, the protocol. So I can only ping IPs. Yes.
Yeah, because my IP will answer even if my router is down. So,
that's a good one.
Yeah. And I didn't say that, by the way. Okay, so I think we do need some way of making a connection. If there is no connection, we need to throw an alert, and then either you can listen for that alert on the IBP network chatter, because there's a way of listening for gossip events, or we could do an active webhook call.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, that's not so hard. Okay. Any other ideas, guys?
The thing we experienced with the boot nodes the other day, maybe there's a way to know if there's any blocks pruning on the boot node, because if it's pruning blocks, then it's not going to function as a boot node.
So yes,
I'm not sure if there's a way to find out, but maybe it's possible to query the Genesis block again on parachain nodes.
Doing a full check on the boot node, as in the chat we were discussing about building from source a whole a whole node without the rest of the boot nodes in the specification of the chain, and then trying to sign the chain from it. So it would be too big of a infrastructure just to test boot nodes, wouldn't it? Or would it be practical?
Miloš, do you mean it would be practical if we tried to actually run the node binary with the parameters to test the thing? Am I getting right?
Yeah, but Tom was challenging that the test we are actually using to test our boot nodes is not really testing the function of a boot node, because it is trying to not only grab the configuration of the chain, but it's also trying to sync. And the boot node should be only providing the first function, but the syncing should be done with any other node in the network.
Yeah, I think it's open to this discussion at that point. From my point of view, I think a boot node should be able to serve everything by itself. So,
okay.
I mean, so to speak, it should be able to save the network just by itself.
Exactly.
So I think it should provide
yes,
syncing
both
as well.
Yes, and to be fair, there is not much difference between pruning 10 and pruning archive canonical. So it's just a little bit more of space. So not massive, not massive.
Okay.
So let's just go back. There's two comments there. Kutsali, you're saying a boot node should be able to save the network. What about history? Because if we lose all of our archive nodes, but we still have our boot nodes, yes, you'll have the state, and people's balances will be correct, but you won't have the history. Not that I think we need to be guardians of the history, but let's just clarify what the group wants to do about that. Because if we want to save the history as well, then in our boot nodes, we need to switch to archive equals, pruning equals archive.
Yeah, actually, Tom's point was that we shouldn't use our RPC nodes as boot nodes, but I don't really agree, because an RPC node has the history. It has everything. So maybe we're doing just redundant nodes by running the boot nodes. So I don't think it would affect the performance of an RPC node if it was a boot node, because the requests are going to be like very minimal, because there are a number of boot nodes first, and second, even if there are like lots of requests to the node as boot node, it shouldn't really affect the RPC performance, and we'll be running redundant nodes anyway at some point. So I think an archive node acting as a boot node would be a very strong support for the network.
So if you take the function, I see your hand, Dennis, thanks. If you take the function of a boot node, it's really not, in my view, to serve the data. In my view, the function of a boot node acts as the meeting point so that you could find other peers. And then your peers list grows to 40 or whatever it is, and you will sync either in warp or normal from all the peers, not only from the boot node. So I think there is a case for having RPC nodes being boot nodes, because they're just saying the boot node, in my view, the boot node's job is I'm always here. You can always come to me, not to get full state, but to find out the rest of, to be able to make connections throughout the rest of the network. That's my opinion. So I support that. You had a comment, Dennis.
Yeah, I had two inputs. So regarding the archive nodes, that would be actually a good idea, because you do understand that it contributes a lot to the network itself, to a lot of parameters of the network from the stability, decentralization, and availability perspective. So it definitely makes sense to maybe even increase encourage people to run archive nodes, but not necessarily all of them, of course. That's first. And the second one, I get the impression that you want to query telemetry, Polkadot telemetry a lot. Don't you think it would be better, like from the timings wise and from the availability point of view, to host another telemetry?
I was saying that yes. Anybody else can answer if they want, but I was saying that there is a case for us running our own telemetry server, and then you just add another line in the config file, sending telemetry to our server as well. I think there's a case for that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And it doesn't take too much. It is really nimble on resources.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to go back 2 or 3 topics before, or comments before, on the screen I've got this highlighted, which is the -- reserved only flag that I was using to test if a node starts syncing. And in my view, this is enough to prove that a node is up, is functioning, and can seed blocks to anybody who connects. So then taking that one step further, Tom was saying, yes, but once you are fully synced, then the reserved only flag you might not stay in that sort of locked. Once your node is fully synced, you might actually connect to other peers. But I think the job of a boot node is already done by that time. So I think this is enough of a test. If you run Polkadot command with whatever it is, up here, this with a reserved only, and you put the reserved node to be the node you want to test. And if that boot node allows you to connect and you start syncing, then in my view, this boot node, or it doesn't have to be a boot node, could be an RPC node, is functioning correctly. Another thing that you could do, and I don't know how to do this specifically without diving into the libp2p connection manager code, is to make a connection to this node and ask it for some peers. Because that's the job of a boot node. The job of a boot node is to say, thank you for connecting. Oh, by the way, there are 500 other people you could connect to, and here are their addresses, right? And there's some code in the IBP monitor. Have I got it open? No, let me just open it quickly. If you look at the monitor, what we do is we configure gossip sub, which is pub sub over gossip. That's how the messages get across. And then we create a libp2p server. And in the libp2p server, we have something called a connection manager. And there's lots of stuff that you can configure inside the connection manager. And I'm just wondering, if you speak to a connection, if you configure a connection manager in a certain way, could you get stuff out of it? And also in peer discovery, you could say, well, how do you want to discover peers? Can you do it via MDNS? Can you do it via the bootstraps? This is how we do it via bootstrap. If you were to write the code yourself, but obviously Polkadot's got that already built in. And then you could use something called PubSub peer discovery. This is just how the monitor discovers other monitors, right? But I don't think I want to get into that level of detail when we're just monitoring our nodes. I think it's sufficient, first, certainly for our next piece of work, to use this bootstrapping command that we've already seen here. And if our node starts syncing with this as an upstream peer, then I think that's sufficient. And we can do this for Polkadot and for parachains. This is obviously an example for parachain, but we could do it for Polkadot and parachain.
Can I ask a question here? So regarding this reserved nodes, and when you mentioned the exact node, do you expect the behavior that if it would be a boot node, that's the first assumption, and it would suggest some peers, then you will, so that this node which you're running will be automatically connected to those peers instead of the reserved only reserved nodes? That's kind of undefined behavior.
Yeah.
And this is kind of not stateful at all.
Any ideas?
From the top of my head, that would be an interesting idea to add, the request to the node which you mentioned in the reserved nodes, to ask it exactly like explicitly for suggestions of peers, and then rerun it with a different flag. That would be better, I think. Or like kind of agree, put another flag to agree on the suggested nodes or something. To be able to understand what's going on in your Polkadot command line, how exactly it behaves. And I'm not suggesting they're there, I mean,
So here is minus boot nodes, and I would like to know if that overwrites the boot nodes that are written into the code. That's going to be really interesting because you can specify boot nodes in the Polkadot command.
yep.
So if you have this, does it overwrite what's in the minus boot nodes?
Command F.
Command F. Thank you. It says specify a list of boot nodes. And I wonder if that will overwrite what's in the chain. Okay, this is a good test. This is a good test. Because then we could basically run this instead of reserve. Do we need reserved only as well?
No.
Because that would basically tell us two things.
Mm-hmm.
You connect to the boot node. The boot node tells you about other peers, and your peer count should grow. Basically, you should get to your full peer count, like 20 or 5 each in and out, etc. And the node should sync. The question is, what happens if you don't find any peers? So we could use this. We could say that this is the boot node, and we could also say that it's reserved only, and we could say that this is the reserved node. So we could do two tests. Can you actually sync from a boot node? That's test 1. And then if you just connect it to the boot node, does it tell you about other nodes? And then your peer count should grow. Yeah. That's two tests we could do. All right. Good. Cool. Don't look now, but I think we're getting somewhere. Just a time check. We've got about 12 minutes left of our scheduled time. I can stay on for longer. I don't know if you guys need to go.
I got 10 minutes left.
Okay. So if we have, has anybody got any ideas about the checks that we should be doing? I'd like to also spend a little bit of time on alert management and where we send our alerts. One of the things I thought we could do is if we create a group here called IBP alerts or IBP monitor. That's one place where we could just send any monitoring instance that comes across an anomaly and wants to send an alert. We could send an alert to this bot, or we could have a bot on the chat which would just send an alert. That's not really good for getting people up at 4 o'clock in the morning, if that's important. Just some thoughts. Anybody got any thoughts on how to send alerts?
Yeah, I think we should pick the most obnoxious option, which would be just a phone call. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, it's impossible to pay attention to like messages from Telegram or Element or something else. So I think we absolutely need a phone call.
I
So
agree.
that's Twilio, isn't it? That's Twilio integration.
Yeah.
When I've been on a duty, on pager duty for Polkadot and Kusama nodes, yeah, our pager duty was set up for a call, notification, and alarm in the pager duty. But yeah, we've been like on duties during the nights as well.
So we should have an escalation process. The first one should be, hey,
Yes.
there's an error. And if the error isn't acknowledged, sorry, if the alarm isn't acknowledged within a certain amount of time, you get ever more obnoxious, right? So we could have Matrix, Telegram, other, whatever it is, Discord. These are easy options. They're all doable. We could have emails. And then if that doesn't resolve, then we'll have PagerDuty. And then if that doesn't resolve, then we'll have Twilio for PagerDuty. Okay. I have experience of writing Telegram and Discord bots. Does anybody else have experience of writing a Matrix bot?
Paolo does, I think. I've never played with it. Yeah.
Yeah, Paolo's got more than one Matrix bot. I think he's got about 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, hello
Okay.
guys. Yeah, no, well, to run the matrix, but it will be fine to build something around that. I think that's good.
Yeah. Excellent. So shall we create the group for IBP monitor, and we can all belong to that, and it, off of the back of that, I think what we'll need to do is you'll get the alert here, but you can't squash the alert here. You'll have to have some URLs or some, because I like the way that Telegram does it. I don't know if it's possible in, for example, if you're in Telegram, you get this menu where you can just type commands. And you can just click a command. And when you click a command, for example, it does stuff. And what you could do is you could just, if you alert to the matrix, and I don't know if matrix allows us to do that, but anybody could come in here and you could click on something that would acknowledge the alarm, and that would stop the escalation. That's just the idea that I was thinking of.
Yeah, it's possible in Matrix.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that's just an interesting way of doing it. And we all favor Matrix because I think, well, I don't favor Matrix, but I think the group favors Matrix because we're all on here anyway. Great. So, right, 5 minutes left before people have to drop. That's alert propagation to Matrix. What about ideas I haven't even thought of? Because I'm very focused on the design that I've come up with. And I'm conscious of the fact that we're just going along with this. But is there stuff that you guys, ideas that you guys have got that we can do the same but different? Or should we just carry on with this? Because what the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to start splitting out the monitoring function into a series of workers. And those workers will just do the monitoring. That will mean that we will actually have to go from SQLite to MySQL, perhaps. And we'll also have to run a Redis. So the whole architecture is bulking up. It's getting more, not cumbersome, but the requirements are growing to run the monitor tool. I could use some help with that if anybody wants to help. It's not a lot of work. It's just has to be done. But I could also use some help with technically investigating how we want to implement these. I'm just offering because I know that I'm doing a lot of the work, and Tom has mentioned on a number of occasions that there are other people who want to contribute, and I'm giving you guys an opportunity to say you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, Derek, I would like to contribute, but yeah, I think I just wouldn't know where to start. But I also think I should just get started and I'll find a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if these are all tasks, then maybe we can make issues for them, and then I can just pick one and make my way through there.
Cheers, Dennis. Dennis has dropped. Yeah, I think the first step would be to clone the repo and get a copy of the monitor running. And then I'm happy to do peer sharing with you to get you up and running, to see how you could make the changes. And then also to carve out, for example, the monitoring. If you have a look here in lib, all of the workers are here. So there's the health checker class, and in the health checker class, you will see all the code runs. And my proposal is to take the health checker class and convert it into a bull MQ worker, and there are templates for that I can share. Yeah, and then just running this, doing Docker scripts to bring everything up, to bring the server up, and to bring the bull MQ up, and the readers up, and it won't be SQLite, it'll be MySQL. So it'll be a Docker Compose file with 4 services. Fairly straightforward stuff, but that's the way I'm proposing we get involved. Does anybody else want to work on Paolo? Is this interesting for you to work on Matrix Box?
Yeah. At some point, I'd like to contribute as well.
Okay.
But like Kukabi said, I think the main issue every time we pick up a new project is just you have to do this kind of time to dive into the code that other people's written. So
what do you mean? My code is perfect.
No, I believe you just need to find time. Nothing wrong about it, to be honest. So, but like you just suggest, I think if you can make that Docker composed with all of those, I don't know, if you can put the kind of the project in a place that will potentially be easier. Okay, if I want to start in a week time or whatever, I will just run that Docker compose. I know that I'll have those services running locally here. For example, for the matrix box, eventually I probably need to find out if I will just, I don't know, query the database to pick up the data that will be relevant, or if eventually, I'm not sure if I ever work with what do we have there? You mentioned something MEQ. What?
So have a look here. I'll share this link, right? So all the code is already on here. Mm-hmm. It's very up to date. Mm-hmm. There is a Docker file here already, and it's just running the one service, and there's already some, how to get started on it. And how to run it using something called PM2 if you want. But anyway, there's a Docker here. You could build it, you can compose it, and as soon as you've composed it, you will have a full version of the exact current design running locally. And what I propose to do then is to expand on this.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think it will take me some time just to pick up and to understand what's going on around there, and then as soon as but I was just referring you in terms of the main services that you have. So you have SQLite, you have this, what's the bull MQ? I'm not sure. It's just to push.
So these are not in place yet.
Ah, okay.
So they're not in place yet. Everything is running inside of one file, which is called server.js. It's this file here. Everything comes from there. And what it's doing is it's serving the front end using Express.js, and it's also using lib P2P to listen to its own mesh network of all the other monitors around, and it's also reading and writing to the database. So those things I think need to be separated, and that's why I'm saying when we separate them, the most obvious thing to do is to take the health check, process, which runs every 5 minutes, and to put that into a worker. And in order to have a worker, you need to have bullMQ, and bullMQ requires Redis. So these guys will come in the next iteration, in the next version.
Okay.
But I'm happy to work with Kutzal on this. And what we'll do is we'll agree with you an API, or somehow, or maybe a worker could be, I don't know, the bot for the matrix. Let's have a look at that design. If that's too big a step for you, Paul.
Well, no. Well, if we can, I'm not sure how just the bullMQ works, to be honest. But in terms of the Redis, I'm quite familiarized with Redis as well. So if there's a need to push notifications from Redis, we can also do that eventually. Or I'm not sure if that will be the job for bullMQ. I'm not quite familiar with that, to be honest.
It's mostly background jobs. It's not synchronous. So yeah.
We can push notifications through Redis too, Paul, if that's what you need.
Yeah. Well, at some point, I think I probably just need to understand if it will be the job of the matrix bot, for example, to, I don't know, just to query. Well, just can have some kind of subscription service, or if it will be just query the database or Redis eventually at some point. I don't know. I think we need to understand what probably best at some point.
And just to close the loop, what we'll do then is we will, once we have alerts working to the matrix group, we will also investigate with Milos and Tom how those alerts will come into Anycast and GeoDNS.